On to episode 18, Roe vs. Wade. As in row, like you row your boat. Stewie drags Brian to appear on the Price is Right game show, where Brian wins a boat. Feeling jealous and annoyed by Brian's smugness, Stewie mocks Brian for his bad Roe vs. Wade pun that he put on the boat, causing Brian to try to prove to Stewie that he cares about the issue by sailing to Texas to help women seeking abortions and escort them back up north. Unfortunately for Brian, he owes the IRS $40,000 in taxes for the boat, meaning he either has to give up some of the patients for bounties or relinquish the boat. Meanwhile, while Peter is drunk and blacked out, Banksy draws on his face and he becomes an art piece that museums want to show off. Lois is annoyed by this because it means he isn't spending time with her or the family. I'm giving this a 2 out of 10. It's another boring Brian is cocky plot. He starts off mocking The Price is Right, not wanting to be on the show, saying that the fans of the show will get excited for anything. But then he is chosen as the next contestant and he gets excited. So Brian wins the boat on the show and begins to act self-centered as usual, as the writers have ditched what made Brian likable in the first place and rewrote his entire character for some reason. Stewie isn't likable either because all he does is mock Brian and point out all his flaws while wishing he won the boat. This dynamic isn't funny when there's nothing to laugh at. The jokes don't land, and Brian being self-centered is not funny in and of itself. I think the show thinks it is though. It all ends with Brian having to give up the boat, so nothing happened other than having a bunch of women on the boat, and then they weren't on the boat anymore. It's not revealed whether or not he actually helped them in the end up. Now the subplot, which sucks a little bit less than this one, but still sucks. Lois having a problem with Peter being an art piece is said to be because the family and her life won't be the same without him, even though it always seems like it would be better, and the show is always telling us it would be better, and in the end it's revealed that Lois needs Peter so they can be miserable together. Okay, I think that was a very remarkable and hilarious plot, and absolutely not a waste of time and energy. Okay, I'll admit, the Just Stop Oil reference is kind of funny, and there was like maybe a few other jokes in this episode that were funny. On to episode 19, Fahrenheit 451. Lois begins editing children's books to be more PC, which annoys Brian, who sees it as an insult to writers everywhere. Vocally expressing his opinions at a school meeting causes the right wing to view him in high regard, which causes his book Faster Than the Speed of Love to become popular again. But Brian does not want to be associated with the right wing, and at a MAGA conference he calls out both the left and the right, but they begin reading his book and finding out it's actually terrible, bringing them together in hatred of Brian's book. Meanwhile, Peter notices drinking has a bad influence on him and his friends, and they all agree to quit. But Lois and the family begin to dislike sober Peter, and his friends find that they all have nothing in common anymore when they're sober. I'm giving this a 1 out of 10. Yeah, it's another really awful one. I thought the chicken or the Meg was bad in part 1. Speaking of that episode, I think I'm going to give it a 2 instead. 1 seems a little harsh for an episode that at least tried. This doesn't try at all. Well, at least for the main plot. The subplot tries a tiny bit, the teensiest bit, by trying to have a message about how you can still complain about unnecessary woke stuff and not be on the side of the right-wing nutters. Lois and her friends editing the books to be more PC is a plot point that is actually forgotten about halfway through the episode. Like, there's a big thing about how she and her friends are really concerned about what kids are reading these days, and there's a montage of them changing book titles to be more safe and positive, and then it's just dropped. Why did Lois even need to be the one to do this? It doesn't make a difference if it has no conclusion. Anybody could have been changing the books. The way this plot actually concludes is both the left and the right become united and all agree that Brian's book is the only book that needs to be banned. I mean, if you find that Brian is a terrible writer stick funny, you might find this ending funny, but for me, I never found it funny, so this ending isn't funny. Brian's speech about how both sides are bad is the same nonsense everyone's heard a million times, so really this plot has nothing to say. The plot that Lois was fucking relegated to halfway through is the awful plot about how Peter becomes sober after he realizes drinking has a bad influence on him and his friends, so they all agree to stop drinking. Then they become boring, and sober Peter starts to annoy Lois, and yeah, they're really doing this. My friend Babodex thinks this is one of the worst B-plots in the show ever, next to Stewie's head being cracked open in season 8. Maybe I wouldn't go as far to say that, but it is really shit. Like, the episode is pretty much advocating for being a drunken idiot, because Lois sets up an intervention for Peter about how they don't like him when he's sober, and he discovers he and his friends apparently have nothing in common with each other when they're sober. Why, just why? I would understand if the message was drinking is okay in moderation, but by saying that he and his friends have nothing in common with each other if they don't drink, and that Peter is nothing but a bore when he isn't drunk, it's just stupid, and makes it feel like the overall message is being sober makes you not fun to be around. You might say to me, the episode doesn't have a message, it's just trying to be funny. I am aware of that possibility, but that's still how it comes across. In fact, not even. That is the message at the end, even as they didn't intend it to be. The whole intervention bit really isn't funny anyway, so it failed in trying to be funny, leaving nothing but a stupid concept that Peter's friendships cannot function without being drunk, and a message that feels like it's trying to say sober makes you a loser. I do think they were trying to say drinking in moderation is better than not drinking at all, but they just couldn't express that properly since the show is literally a cast of drunks. But I still think it's insulting to suggest that not drinking at all makes you horrible to be around. Like, some people choose not to drink, who cares? On to episode 20, Twain's World, the last episode of the season. After Brian's creative writing mentor tells him he has no good ideas, he goes back in time to try and get inspiration for his stories from Mark Twain. Brian convinces Twain to come to the present, which ends up being a bad idea as Twain becomes obsessed with modern pornography. I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. Shock horror, just in time for Halloween. Yeah, I know some people thought I would probably rate this lower. Even I thought I would rate this lower, like a 4 at the highest. But here it is at a 5 out of 10. When I saw a certain clip of this episode in my YouTube feed, I was like, what the hell are Family Guy doing anymore? But then I watched the episode and it's honestly fine. Like, slightly above average, which is what the 5 rating means to me. It's got an interesting concept and utilized it in a funny way. Maybe not the best way they could have utilized it, but I still think it can be funny. And it is a comedy after all. Like, at one point, all of the porno videos are Mark Twain themed, and I just find that so bizarre that it's funny. I'm sorry, I can't dislike this episode. They even made the Brian is a terrible writer stick funny, somehow, because he submits a version of Huckleberry Finn that Mark Twain was writing while in the present, and shows it to his creative writing class, in a class full of millennials. That is pretty funny, even if they really overdo it with the sensitive millennial thing. Like, some of the jokes here really reek of the new norm and the same as the old norm. Also, because of submitting this to the class, Brian is cancelled for the 2nd time this season, and the 3rd time overall. What is it with cancelling Brian? Well, it's finally done. The entirety of season 23 reviewed. I really tried to say at least something about some of these nothing burgers. It was hard at times, but still fun to do. With every episode reviewed, let's take a look at the season overall then. Is it really one of the worst seasons ever? No, this season is mostly mid. Season 8 and Season 12 have a lot worse episodes, even if this season does have more bad episodes than most seasons. Like, the worst episode from this season would have to be Cool Hand Lois, with Fahrenheit coming in 2nd, and The Chicken or the Meg 3rd. Even compared to a lot of other episodes I think are shit, which I'll show in the list here, this season isn't that bad. Like, even ones that aren't in Season 8 or 12, like Seahorse She-Sail Party, Screams of Silence, Be Careful What You Fish For, Not All Dogs Go to Heaven, and Brian the Closer, are worse than Season 23. Not that everything you see here is worse, but a lot of it is. So yeah, just a very mid-season, only has 3 truly bad episodes, and at least The Chicken or the Meg tried, even if it failed miserably. Fahrenheit tried to have a political message, although it was nothing we haven't heard before, and Cool Hand Lois was just a lump of shite. I think that's the only awful episode of this season. Actually, fuck it. The Chicken or the Meg and Fahrenheit are 2 out of 10, actually. Fuck Cool Hand Lois. On a lighter note, China Doll would have to be the best, with Hard Times at Adam West High coming in 2nd, and Twins World 3rd. China Doll's the one episode I saw shortly after it came out that I genuinely liked. The other 2 I only saw recently to make this video. Anyway, that's it for now. Don't know if there will ever be a Season 24 review. Well, maybe. But some of the episode titles for that season, I'm worried I'll have very little to say about. Like, I feel this one will be about American football, which I don't know anything about. But then again, I did talk about Top Gun and all the other shitty anthologies they did this season. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to subject myself again to that Season 24 Halloween special, because it's truly scary, and that's what we need on Halloween.